He stood in court, ready to expose the truth behind the crash that shattered his life and took his closest friend. Justice was about to be served. He stood in the courtroom, the cold glare of the overhead lights casting sharp shadows across his face, revealing every line of tension and grief. Dwayne Johnson, known to millions as a hero on screen and a powerhouse in the ring, looked different now. His eyes, usually filled with confidence and strength, held a heavy shadow of loss. Today, he wasn't just a star, an athlete, or an actor. Today, he was a man ready to uncover the truth. This morning marked the first step on a path that would change everything. He was accusing P. Diddy, the powerful music mogul and business titan, of orchestrating a deadly setup that shattered his life and took away the person he cared about most. The accident that claimed his best friend, the one who had always stood by his side, supported him, believed in him, was no accident. It was a carefully planned trap. That night, time seemed to freeze. The car they were in suddenly lost control and slammed into a concrete barrier. When the police arrived, Dwayne was barely breathing. His friend was already gone. Doctors called it a miracle that Dwayne survived, but in his heart burned a hellish suspicion. This was not just a crash. Years of silence and doubt were replaced by a fierce hunger for justice. Today, he was ready to tell the world what he knew and fight for the truth, no matter the cost. The courtroom was his arena, and truth was his weapon. In that moment, he knew the road ahead would be brutal, but there was no turning back. And this story was just beginning. The night of the accident played over and over in Dwayne Johnson's mind like a broken film reel. Fragments of flashing headlights, screeching tires, and the deafening sound of metal smashing against concrete. It wasn't supposed to happen. Not like that. Not to him, and certainly not to Marcus, his best friend since childhood, his brother in arms, the one person who had always stood steady beside him, no matter what. They had been driving back from a late-night meeting, the city's neon lights blurring past the windows. Marcus had just landed a major deal for a charity project they both cared about, a chance to make a difference beyond the bright lights and roaring crowds. There was laughter in the car, talk of future plans, promises made in that moment of shared hope. But in an instant, everything shattered. Dwayne barely remembered the impact. His last conscious thought was the steering wheel jerking violently, the car spinning out of control. Then darkness. When he came to, the world was eerily quiet, except for the distant wail of sirens and the pounding of his own heartbeat. Marcus wasn't moving. He was gone. Doctors said it was a miracle Dwayne survived. They called it a tragic accident, one of those cruel, random events that nobody could have predicted or prevented. But Dwayne's gut screamed otherwise. The pieces didn't add up. The timing was too precise, the circumstances too strange. There was something sinister lurking beneath the surface. In the weeks that followed, grief and shock clouded everything. Dwayne felt hollow, like a part of himself had died with Marcus. But that hollow space slowly filled with a relentless need for answers. The police report was thin on details, and witnesses seemed to have faded away like smoke. The investigation stalled. No arrests, no suspects. That's when the whispers began. Quiet murmurs from old friends, vague mentions of rivalries, hidden enemies, names tossed around in shadows. And one name kept coming up. Sean Combs. P. Diddy. A man with power, influence, and a reputation that stretched far beyond music. A man who could pull strings nobody saw, manipulate outcomes in ways that looked like chance. Dwayne had never wanted to believe it. P. Diddy had been in the same circles, and while there had been tension, rivalry, business competition, nothing personal, or so he thought. But the more he dug, the more he uncovered strange connections. Contracts mysteriously lost, deals sabotaged, people who suddenly became untraceable. He learned that Marcus had recently crossed paths with people linked to Diddy's empire. Business associates who were not what they seemed. And those associates had reasons to want Marcus out of the way. Reasons tied to lucrative deals, power plays, and secrets best kept buried. Dwayne's world shifted. The accident wasn't an accident at all. It was a setup. A deadly chess move in a game he had barely begun to understand. And P. Diddy was at the center. With every piece of evidence, the weight of the truth pressed harder on Dwayne's chest. The loss of Marcus wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was part of something bigger, something dark and dangerous. And if he was going to survive this fight, he had to step out of the shadows and confront it head-on. So, he prepared. Gathered allies, hired private investigators, pulled every string he could reach. The man who once faced battles in the ring was now gearing up for the fight of his life in the courtroom. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about justice. For Marcus, for himself, and for the truth that refused to stay silent. The courtroom would be the stage where everything came to light, and Dwayne was ready to bring down a titan. The days after the accident had been a blur of grief and anger, but slowly, Dwayne Johnson's pain transformed into determination. He knew that if he wanted justice for Marcus, he couldn't rely on the police or the system. Too many powerful hands were involved, and too many things were already buried beneath layers of silence and influence. So he took matters into his own hands. His first move was to hire a private investigator, someone with experience in the darkest corners of business and crime. Someone who could dig where official channels wouldn't. The man's name was Carter, a grizzled veteran with a reputation for uncovering truths others preferred to keep hidden. Carter didn't ask questions about fame or fortune. He only cared about facts, and Dwayne gave him one simple order. Find out everything about that night. Every detail, every lead, every shadow connected to the crash. Weeks turned into months as Carter peeled back layers of deceit. The investigation revealed odd inconsistencies. The car's black box data had been partially wiped. A witness who'd seen the crash vanished without a trace, and surveillance footage from nearby cameras mysteriously corrupted. It was like someone was covering their tracks with surgical precision. Then came the leads pointing directly to P. Diddy's sphere of influence. Carter discovered that the vehicle involved in the crash had been tampered with. Brakes cut, steering mechanisms subtly altered, enough to cause loss of control at high speeds. The parts were sourced from a supplier linked to one of Diddy's shell companies. Further digging exposed a web of fake companies, fake contracts, and fake employees, all designed to mask illegal activities. But that was only the beginning. Marcus had been working on a deal that threatened to undermine a massive business venture tied to P. Diddy's interests. It involved a new media platform set to revolutionize digital entertainment, something that could shift billions in revenue and influence. Marcus's role wasn't just financial. He had access to critical intellectual property and insider information that Diddy's competitors desperately wanted to control or silence. Dwayne learned that the night of the accident, Marcus had scheduled a secret meeting with a whistleblower, someone ready to expose a network of corruption within the industry. That meeting never happened. Marcus never arrived. And shortly after, the crash occurred. The pieces started to fall into place. It wasn't random. It was orchestrated. Dwayne felt the weight of this truth crushing down on him. It wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about betrayal, power, and a fight against a system designed to protect the powerful and bury the powerless. He pushed further. Carter tracked down former employees, insiders who had left the company in fear or disgust. One by one, they came forward, speaking in hushed tones about intimidation, threats, and hush money. They described how P. Diddy's empire was a fortress built on fear and control, where dissent was crushed and loyalty bought. But even with mounting evidence, Dwayne knew this was just the surface. The real battle would be in court, where money and influence could sway the truth like a double-edged sword. So he assembled a legal team, experts in criminal law, corporate fraud, and high-profile litigation. Together, they began piecing the case into a narrative strong enough to stand against Diddy's powerful defense. The court date was set, and the media frenzy began. Rumors swirled, alliances shifted, and the entertainment world watched with bated breath. P. Diddy denied everything, dismissing the accusations as baseless and malicious. But Dwayne was undeterred. For him, this was personal. More than that, it was justice for Marcus. As the trial approached, the tension grew palpable. Every move was scrutinized, every word weighed. The stage was set for a showdown that would shake the foundations of fame, power, and truth itself. The courtroom buzzed with a charged energy the moment Dwayne Johnson walked in. Cameras flashed, whispers floated through the air, and every eye was fixed on the man who had become the center of a storm. He wasn't just a celebrity here. He was a fighter, standing toe-to-toe with one of the most powerful figures in the music industry, P. Diddy. The judge called the court to order, and the trial began. Dwayne's legal team presented the opening statement, laying out the accusations. A deadly accident, no accident at all, but a calculated plot orchestrated to silence Marcus. They painted a picture of manipulation, deceit, and cold-hearted ambition. The room was silent, hanging on every word. When it was Dwayne's turn to take the stand, he rose with a calm strength that belied the storm inside. He spoke with raw honesty, recounting the night of the crash, the loss of his closest friend, and the painful trail that led him here. His voice trembled at times, but never faltered. The courtroom felt the weight of his grief and his resolve. The defense wasted no time. P. Diddy's lawyers attacked relentlessly, questioning every detail, attacking the evidence, and painting Dwayne as a grieving man desperate for someone to blame. They called witnesses to dispute the tampering of the car, to question the credibility of the insiders, and to challenge the entire narrative. But Dwayne's team was ready. They presented forensic experts who detailed the mechanical sabotage. They introduced whistleblowers who testified under oath about the culture of fear and intimidation within Diddy's empire. Emails, phone records, and hidden audio recordings surfaced, revealing secret conversations and orders that could no longer be ignored. As the trial progressed, tension soared. The courtroom became a battleground of sharp exchanges and emotional testimonies. P. Diddy, usually composed and charismatic, showed rare glimpses of strain. His stoic mask cracked when confronted with undeniable evidence. The public watched with rapt attention. Social media exploded with opinions and speculation. Fans of both men took sides, fueling a frenzy that blurred the lines between justice and spectacle. One pivotal moment came when a former associate of Diddy took the stand. His testimony was a bombshell, describing explicit instructions to handle Marcus, to make an example of anyone who threatened the empire. The room held its breath as he revealed the extent of the conspiracy. Dwayne's heart pounded. This was the moment justice seemed within reach. But the fight wasn't over. Diddy's defense launched a counterattack, accusing Dwayne of orchestrating a smear campaign, fabricating evidence, and exploiting the tragedy for fame. The courtroom was on edge, the stakes higher than ever. Behind the scenes, negotiations and threats unfolded. Powerful players whispered in dark corridors, trying to sway the outcome. The line between law and power blurred, revealing a world where truth was often the first casualty. Yet, through it all, Dwayne remained steadfast. Every day in court was a step closer to truth, a step closer to clearing Marcus's name and bringing the real culprit to light. As the days passed, the courtroom drama reached a fever pitch. The final arguments loomed, promising a verdict that would echo far beyond these walls. For Dwayne, it was more than a trial. It was a reckoning. The courtroom atmosphere was thick with anticipation and tension. Every eye was fixed on the proceedings, every ear straining to catch the next word. Part 4 of the trial was the pivotal chapter, the moment when all the hidden truths, carefully concealed for years, would begin to surface and shake the foundations of power. Dwayne Johnson sat poised but alert. His normally imposing frame radiated calm control, yet inside, his mind raced with every possible outcome. Months of preparation had led to this day, for Marcus, for justice, for the truth that refused to be buried. The prosecution called their final witness, a man whose very presence sent ripples through the courtroom. A former trusted lieutenant in P. Diddy's vast empire, he was a figure both feared and respected in the underworld of power and influence. But now, his allegiance had shifted. His conscience had won over loyalty. As he took the stand, a hush fell over the room. His eyes scanned the faces before him, from the judge to the jurors to P. Diddy himself, whose expression remained unreadable but guarded. The witness's voice was steady but heavy with the weight of the secrets he was about to reveal. "I was there," he began, "when the decision was made. The decision to eliminate Marcus, to remove the threat he posed." The words hit like a thunderclap. He described the cold, clinical planning behind the accident, how the car had been sabotaged, how insiders within the organization had been ordered to cover their tracks, to ensure no direct link could ever be found. The witness spoke of covert meetings, whispered threats, and an empire built on fear and silence. Dwayne's attorney pressed for details, each question peeling back more layers of the conspiracy. The witness named names, dates, and places, giving the jury a glimpse into a world where power was wielded without conscience. The defense scrambled. They unleashed a barrage of attacks on the witness's credibility, painting him as a disgruntled traitor, motivated by greed or revenge. Their cross-examinations were relentless, attempting to sow doubt and confusion. But the witness remained steadfast, unwavering in his testimony. Then came the turning point. Dwayne's legal team introduced a series of audio recordings, clandestinely obtained conversations between P. Diddy and his closest advisors. The voices were unmistakable, discussing the Marcus problem with chilling detachment. Plans were laid out to send a message, to keep the empire secure, all while pretending ignorance in public. As the recordings played, the courtroom seemed to freeze. P. Diddy's composed mask faltered. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. His eyes darted, avoiding contact. The evidence was undeniable, a brutal exposé of calculated malice. For the first time, the titan of industry and music was cornered, exposed in front of the world. Dwayne rose, his voice resonating through the chamber. This trial is about more than just the loss of a friend. It's about holding the powerful accountable. It's about justice, fairness, and the truth. No one is above the law. A palpable shift swept through the courtroom. The scales of justice seemed to tip. The media outside erupted. Headlines screamed of scandal, betrayal, and a battle that had shaken the very core of fame and fortune. Social media exploded with support for Dwayne, countless voices calling for transparency and change. But the fight was far from over. The defense requested a recess, retreating to strategize. Tensions ran high behind closed doors. Advisors debated fiercely, knowing that the verdict could alter the landscape of power forever. For Dwayne, the weight of the moment was immense, but so was his resolve. Every sleepless night, every memory of loss, every ounce of pain fueled his determination. The final day loomed ahead, a day where justice would be served or denied. And Dwayne Johnson was ready to face the outcome, no matter what. The courtroom was silent as the jury filed back in, their faces unreadable. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Dwayne Johnson stood tall, every muscle taut with anticipation. Across the room, P. Diddy sat motionless, eyes fixed on the floor, his usual confidence replaced by a grim resignation. The foreperson cleared their throat and began reading the verdict. Each word echoed like a thunderclap in the hushed room. We, the jury, find the defendant, Sean Combs, guilty on all counts. The words hit Dwayne like a wave, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over him. Justice for Marcus had finally been served, but the victory was bittersweet. The man who had orchestrated the tragedy was held accountable, yet the pain of loss remained an unhealed scar. As the courtroom erupted in murmurs and flashes from cameras, Dwayne's gaze remained steady. He thought of Marcus, the friend he'd lost, the brother he'd mourned. This wasn't just a win in court. It was a message to those who believed they could wield power without consequence. P. Diddy was led away in handcuffs, his empire beginning to crumble under the weight of truth. Outside, the media frenzy was unstoppable. Headlines screamed of betrayal, justice, and the fall of a titan. Dwayne stepped outside the courthouse, the bright sunlight hitting his face. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the battle finally lift. Yet, he knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where healing and rebuilding would take center stage. Looking out at the crowd of supporters and press, he spoke softly but firmly. This victory belongs to Marcus, to truth, and to anyone who's ever fought to be heard against impossible odds. The fight had been long and brutal, but justice had prevailed. And for Dwayne Johnson, that was everything.